I'm now going to do a quick tutorial on annotating patent figures for submission in briefs and other documents. This tutorial covers annotation using the GNU image manipulation program. It's also known as GIMP. It's free, and so that's why I use it. It's also very easy to use and very powerful. Typically, you will start, however, with a PDF of the patent. So let me open up a PDF here. I have on my desktop a patent, and I'm going to open the PDF. And here we have it. Let's see. I'm going to find the figure that I want to annotate. Let's say figure 8. The easiest way to get one of these PDF images into GIMP is with Acrobat. You go to Select and Zoom, the snapshot tool. I think if you're an Acrobat reader, it's just this little camera icon. There's a picture of it on the actual toolbar somewhere up here. So if you just click that and then you kind of drag your rectangle to pick your figure, you just took a copy of that picture and put it on the clipboard. So that's easy enough. The next thing you want to do is you want to start up the GIMP. I've got a little shortcut on my desktop, and he should be starting up here in a minute. Alright, when the GIMP starts, you'll see three windows. You have your layers and brushes window. You have the general sort of file menu window, and then over here you have your toolbox menu, which has things like paintbrush, an eraser, text tool, cropping, bucket fill tool, color that you use to annotate, those sorts of things. And you'll see how to use those here in a minute. So the first thing you got to do is go to the File menu and create a new image. Let's see. I typically start out by making a 1000 by 1000 pixel image. That's just so it's big enough so that I know it will easily be able to hold my whatever I cut out of my copied from my PDF. And then you can do edit, paste, or you can just hit Control V on your keyboard if you want. But I'll just use the window, and you can see there it is. So GIMP uses layers. If you're not familiar with layers, it's basically just like a picture on top of a picture on top of a picture. So over here in our layers menu, we see, or layers toolbox, we see two layers here. There's a background, and that's the white layer behind. That's at the bottom, and then on top of it is this floating layer, and that's the pasted layer. That's what I just pasted. Now it's currently a floating selection, so it's not really a layer, and you can't really do much with those floating selections. So what you need to do is when you highlight the floating selection, and then you come down to this button which says create a new layer. What that does is it basically uses the floating selection, makes a new layer out of it, and it's now called a pasted layer. You can see it sort of changed how it looks. If I double click that, I can name it, so I can name it figure 8. If you use a lot of layers, which you may, depending on how complex the project is, you'll thank yourself for labeling them so that you know kind of what's what as you're looking through this list over here. These eyeballs just basically turn on and off like the visibility of the layer. So if I wanted to work on the background and I didn't want this figure 8 stuff in the way, I could kind of hide it while I worked on the background. And then when I click it again, it comes back. So now you can see that we have this big image. It's actually too big for the figure that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and crop it. So I come over here to the toolbox, and there's this little razor thing. It's a crop tool. Click it, and then I can drag sort of a rectangle around the part of the figure that I want to be my actual figure. I can drag the corners to sort of fine tune it after I've done the first rectangle. So once I have basic rectangle, I can double click in the middle, and now everything else is gone. It's no longer part of the image, and now I have this smaller image. It's a little small, so I can zoom in if I use the view menu over here. Zoom in, that's also, you could just type on the keyboard the plus. Zoom out is minus. There you go, I zoomed in a little bit. I'm pretty happy with everything here except for this little 6 that's left over. that's not part of figure 8, it was part of figure 6. So I'm going to come over to my toolbox and grab my eraser tool. The eraser tool will help me erase anything that's not, in this case, white. And it erases it into white. So now that I'm happy with that, now I want to annotate this guy. So annotation is typically like highlighting a region. So let's say, for example, there's this sort of C-shaped region in here, and let's say I want to highlight that in yellow. I want it to stand out in yellow. So colors are over here. The default is black and white, but if I click that little black box, I get this color picker. I pick yellow, hit OK. The thing is, when you're highlighting, it's always a good idea to not do it on the original. So I have this figure 8 here, this layer. I actually want to duplicate it. So I click this duplicate layer, and it gives me an exact copy, and this is my figure 8 copy. And it's always good because if you mess up, you want to go back, you always have the original. So creating a copy and working on the copy is always better, and it gives you some advantages. So anytime there's a region that's completely outlined, like this C-shaped section is, the bucket fill tool is the one you want to use. And it's over here. It looks like a bucket, paint bucket. It's called bucket fill tool. If I click that, then I come in here, and I click in that region, voila, it highlights that entire region for me. So that was pretty easy. And I can basically leave it at that if I wanted to. Or I could click in other things too. Wherever something is enclosed in an outline, I can use that bucket fill tool. Now let's say I want to I want to highlight something that's not completely enclosed in. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Let's say I have this oval and I just want to highlight this upper right corner of this oval, this entire oval. I just want to, this 1/4 section. If I use a bucket fill tool here, it's going to give me that entire half section. So that's not what I want. And the reason it does that is because there's no line, closing off that quarter of it. So if I hit Control Z, it undoes what I did. I can come over to my toolbox and use my paintbrush tool. And this is what you use for more fine-tuned highlighting. I'm going to actually pick a green so that we have a different color here. You can see how that works. I can also pick the brush. When I'm doing this kind of work, I don't like, there's this brush that has sort of this feathered edge where you can see it sort of trails off. It's really dark in the middle and it kind of fades out. I don't really like that, so I'm going to click that. I'm going to pick one of these smaller sort of brushes that doesn't fade out, this circle. It doesn't always kind of work exactly how you want it because now it's a circle brush, but the size is 20. So I'm going to actually make the size 5. Hit enter. And so now I have this tiny little brush over here. And you can see if I start painting, I get sort of the green filled in here. Now, you'll notice that as I do this, I'm kind of overwriting some of the black outline, and that kind of looks sloppy. It's overwriting some of the original figure. But if I stay pretty close to within the black, I don't go outside the lines, there's a little trick I can do here. With the figure 8 copy, come up to this mode, and I change it from normal mode to multiply. And you can see that all the black just got darker, and it actually now you don't see those problems I had before, where if I hit undo, you can see I just undid where the black kind of gets all fuzzy where I outlined it. So again, multiply, change that top layer figure 8 copy to the multiply mode, and what that does is it basically lets the black from the layer behind it come through. Makes everything darker that's behind. So that's basically a trick that I have used. It's very handy, and it does the job. So now I'm basically have this highlighted. Another thing I can do is if I want to annotate with text, let's say I want to come over here, I want to make my color red. This is my text tool, this big A. I click it. I don't like the default font down here. It's this sans serif, really thin font, so I typically like to go change it to something like Arial Heavy. click where you want to go. Let's call this portion 1. And you can see when I use a text tool, it creates a new layer over here for my text. Now, the thing about layers is if you're not on, you can only operate on the layer that's highlighted over here in the layer. So portion 1 is sort of this layer is where this text is. Now I have my paintbrush tool. If I try to start painting, I'm over here painting, nothing's happening. Well, the reason is that I'm not on the right layer. If I want to paint over here, I need to be on one of the layers that's over there. So the figure 8 copy is the top layer there, so now I can paint. I'm going to undo that. But for example, if I want to kind of put an arrow here to portion 1 to show what I'm talking about, if I'm on the right layer, figure 8 copy, I can just click once with my paintbrush, and then if I hold shift down, it gives me a straight line. So I can just, bam, straight line, click it again, and there I have my my little arrow that points to portion 1. So assuming I'm happy with this guy, what I want to do is I want to save it. Now, you always want to save, just do save image, and the .xcf file, that's the GIMP file format. You always want to save everything at least once in your GIMP format. So I'll call this annotate 1.xcf. And the reason for saving it in the GIMP format is because you get to save all of these layers. So if you have to go back and change it, they're all there, and so you don't lose any of that information. Now, to put it in a Word file, you actually have to export this to something other than the XCF file, and normally I do JPEGs.jpg. When I do export, it gives me some options. The export image is a JPEG. Default's normally fine, so I hit OK. And so now I've exported it. So if I open up my documents, where I save this, and I go to annotate1.jpg, you can see there's my picture. And that's the annotate1.jpg, that same file here, wherever you saved it, is going to be what you're going to put into your Word document. So that's the basic tutorial. I hope that was helpful. And there are many other things you can do with GIMP once you sort of get used to it and start playing around with it. If there's a particular task or something you like to do, I would highly recommend Googling how to do whatever it is in GIMP. There are lots of tutorials out there, and they're very helpful.